Welcome to another episode of the Rhythm of the Road podcast. This podcast is not just about the journey, but also about the growth, transformation, and self-discovery that comes with life on the proverbial road. Grab a cup of joe, buckle up, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Let's get rolling.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Rhythm of the Road podcast. I'm so glad that you are back and joining us today. I hope that you took a lesson to last week's episode where we talked about making small adjustments that make a huge impact. And if you didn't, please make sure you go back and check out that episode. I think that there are going to be a few people around you that might need to hear that message, and I'd love for you to share it with them. And this kind of goes in tandem with what I was talking about last time about making small adjustments. And this one is more about what are some of those tools that you can give your team or your staff to not only give them to use, but to empower them. Because by empowering them, you're giving yourself back some time. And today's episode is around, I'm going to use the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell as the kind of tool that I use to kind of implement this strategy and use it, and have put it dropped in a few teams' tool belts or tool chests in the last couple of weeks, just to see how they would react, see what they would do with it, see how well it would be received, and then see if they would actually implement this tool. And that tool is the 1-3-1 method, or 1-3-1 rule. And if you're searching on Google for this 1-3-1 rule, just make sure that you look for Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. Otherwise, you're going to get the basketball defense, which is also a good read and a good video to watch. But that's just not the tool that I'm talking about today. And the 1-3-1 rule is when you're really working with a team or your staff, and when they're coming to you with problems. And so the idea with the 1-3-1 rule is if you're sitting down with someone in your team and they're giving you this list of problems that they're trying to solve, and what you want to do is you want to say, what's the one challenge? I hear you saying you have 3, 4, 5 problems. What's the one actual problem or the one challenge, right? So here's the one. And then they're going to deliver what that problem or that challenge is. And then you're going to say, what are the 3 viable options for that challenge or problem? And by viable, we just mean you've put in some time, effort, and energy to suss out what are the actual solutions. They're researched, they're thought out, you've actually done some work on it. And then the last one is, what's the one recommendation based on those 3 viable options that you're going to bring to me? Well, isn't that a beautiful piece of just empowering your team to go and do the work and figure it out and come back to you with the recommendation or solution? 2 things can happen there. The first thing that can happen is they're going to come back to you with that recommendation, and they're going to explain that they had these 3 ideas that they worked through and they figured it out. And this is the recommendation that you're coming back to you with. 9 times out of 10, that recommendation is what you would have chosen anyway, and where you would have gotten to anyway. And we'll go with that. Or like a hybrid version of that, like clearly you thought through all these 3 things and sussed out all these 3 ideas, and you came back with this recommendation. However, let's add this one thing to it, or let's subtract this something from it. And then now you're going back with that recommendation. But what that did for you as the person that sent your team member back was, you didn't have to go spend all that time to figure out and do that, because that's what you hired that team member to do. Now, the second thing that can happen, and this is what we really want to have happen, and why I'm saying that we need to use these tools to empower our team and empower our staff, and then just let them do the work. Because when they come to you with those things, because they're going to, because you're the one that probably has those answers, and when they come to you with that one problem, you can say, what's your 1-3-1? And then let them figure that out and say, hey, just come back to me in 1 to 2 days with what your recommendation is. And what we want to have happen in that time is for them to be just like, I'm good. I got it. It's already figured out. It's taken care of. We've moved on. So not only did that eliminate the time of you having to go figure out, do, act, and execute, they didn't even come back to you to give you any more information because they just took it and ran with it because they knew at that point, and hopefully before then as well, that they've been empowered to do the work that you hired them to do. And I love what Dan illustrates in so many of his videos, and it's part of his book. But he had his hiring manager come to him and say, "Hey, I got to hire 12 people in 30 days." And Dan just goes, "Awesome. That's great." And then his staff member repeated, like, "I need to hire 12 people in 30 days. He's like, "Okay, good. That sounds good." And he goes, "Well, I don't know how to do that. What am I going to do?" And Dan said to his hiring manager, "Well, then what did I hire you for? Because you're the hiring manager. That's what I hired you to do. If I had to do it, then I don't need you." And so then he asked him, "What's his 131? How long will it take you to come up with that?" And the hiring manager said 2 days. And so he walked out of the meeting and he was done. And the next morning at 10 a.m., received a text message that just said, "I'm good," which means he went and figured it out and got it all taken care of. Didn't have to come back to him, didn't have to come back to him, spend that time, waste that time. And not that that time is wasted, and not that every problem can be solved in that way and doesn't need your help. It might need your expertise or your history or the fact that you're the owner or the person in charge of your team. But you're eliminating the amount of times that needs to happen. Because what I've found sometimes is if you keep just giving them the answer when they come to you, then they will always need you. And it's not that they don't ever need you, it's just that they don't need you all the time. And so I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was I was working with a business coach about 8 or 9 years ago, and I was asking him a couple questions. And to me, in my mind, I was texting him and sending questions, and they were very just quick and short and matter of the fact, and like he can just answer for these for me really quick. That was my perception of it. His was, why does he keep messaging me? And so the final message he sent after I had asked a few questions was in individual letters, in individual text messages, he spelt out GOOGLE. All of those were single text messages, so they went scrolled right down my phone. And all I did was send him a facepalm emoji and then you're right. It's totally okay if I actually figure it out for myself, especially for something that might be so simple that something as simple as a Google search could answer it for me in 3 seconds. Instead, I wasted 3 or 4 text messages, which also means that I wasted 3 or 4 text messages worth of time on his end. I learned from that to just stop first, think. I like to call those C thoughts, which means they actually rolled through my brain, not an L thought that just goes right out. And took a moment to be like, okay, you're right. And that's the same effect that I would hope this tool has on your team. And I put this to work in a team this week, and it was a longer meeting, and I did it towards the beginning. And then in the middle and in the end, 2 of the staff people that were in that meeting were like, I just figured out my 131. And I'm like, okay. He's like, well, I have this problem over here, and I just figured out my 131 for that problem. And so I can just go deliver that to that person. This was nothing to do with what was happening in the meeting. He just shut it out because he felt so empowered in the moment to just go do it. And then at the end of the meeting, because of the content and the discussions that we were having in the meeting and the strategies that we were taking, somebody actually shouted out, wow, you just walked us through a 131 without calling it that. And so selfishly, I was like smiling from ear to ear on the inside, because as a teacher and an educator, when we talk about scaffolding skills and putting tools to work, the thing we want is the people we show those tools to or give those skills to put them to work immediately and have them just show up, not be some stressful thing that they have to work so hard at to understand. They just understood it in just a couple of hours. So try it this week. If you want to do a little more research, go check out any of the videos that Dan Martell is doing. We'll put the link to his book, an audiobook, down in the show notes. That way you can go grab it. It's wonderful. I get nothing from it other than the fact that I'm giving you another tool today. So thank you. I appreciate you. Make sure you hit like or subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, thank you so much. Make sure to check out our YouTube channel at Rhythm of the Road Podcast, and I'll see you guys down the road.
Thanks for cruising with me on this episode of Rhythm of the Road. Remember, the journey itself is the destination. Until next time, keep the rhythm flowing, and we'll see you down the road.